Hello, Charlie TCG here, and welcome to another deck profile, which I want to talk to you about Miraidon. I think it's in a pretty good place to be the next like Iona Judge Path sort of deck, and I'm going to give you my thoughts and feelings about how you could build your Miraidon deck in that sort of way. But first, how's it doing in Japan? Well, in the city leagues in the top 8, Miraidon's kind of been going between the 3 to 8%, so it's roughly been about 7% on most of the city league top 8, so it's still pretty relevant. Obviously, not the numbers it had previously. Even in large tournaments, it did in fact get a top 16 in the Japan Nationals, which is actually really impressive that Miraidon is still kind of keeping up with it. But the reason I want to talk to you about it, it's a really interesting ability lock, which you can easily put down a path after you get your tandem unit set up. Like, yes, you still have your Regieleki VMAXs, which can be really detrimental in the late game in certain matchups, but most of the time, hitting like 220 again and again and again is really, really going to stack up, especially under ability lock. And it's a capability of doing one-hit KO, the likes of having those Regieleki VMAX and choice belts either in the late game and serving your energies with Super Rod now being returned, as well as the Flapping Engine. So if we just have a look at the rough sort of deck here, this is the one I've been testing quite a lot and doing pretty well by actually having quite a good Guard of War sort of matchup. The idea is you have your three Miraidon EXs, which is definitely the strongest card in this deck. 220 HP, ability, tandem unit, search your deck for two lightning Pokemon, put them on your bench and shuffle your deck. Your turn doesn't end, which is incredible. And the attack Photon Blast for 2 lightning and the colors does 220 damage, but you can't attack next turn. This is really powerful when you team up for likes of Regieleki VMAX, the likes where you can use the transistor ability where your basic lightning Pokemon do 30 more damage. An additional 90 damage is 310 damage, pretty much KOing everything in the format, which is really, really good. Or if you want to have that, you have Regieleki V with its Thunder Wall, we're doing 100 damage, and it does your opponent's attacks do 100 less damage to it. Really, really powerful to kind of like wall out the opponent. And your other sort of good attackers are your Raikou V, with ability to draw a card with fleet-footed, it's the active, and to 20 plus 20 for each bench Pokemon on both sides. Really, really powerful, again, doing 220 and constantly getting that hit. Then we do play a 1-1 line of Magnezone V. This is really powerful because this gets rid for your Lost Box in your Guard of War matchups. You can just use Magnezone's first attack to bring out the Manaphy to get the KO, and then the opponent has to struggle to constantly try and get it back out. The likes of Super Rod, Clara, and even Miriam potentially if they've got it, and trying to get that Manaphy constantly keep on going, because you can add the pressure with Magnezone's V-Star attack, which does for 2 light energy, 90 damage to 2 of your opponent's benched Pokemon. Really good because those KOs Curliers, those KO Comfies, these KO bench Frigibasses. So it's quite a few very common, very popular low basic Pokemon, even Flapping. So it's definitely something to consider. And then a 1-1 line of Flapping to really help round out the deck to constantly try and get out your energies. Potentially if you set up a Flapping turn 2 to even turn 3, getting extra energy attachment is really, really good because not only do we play Electro Generator, we also play Super Rod to shuffle in any of your Pokemon back in and also Lightning Energy. This could be if you discard your Magnezone V-Star in quite the early sort of game when you have to use the Professor's Research, you can use that back again, which I think really helps Miraidon in this sort of matchup. And you can see here, we're talking about the other item cards. We play 1 copy of Lost Vacuum. This is a way to bump other sort of paths out in place so you can carry on, or potentially re-disrupt your opponent. If they have a Forest Steel Stone, or potentially an EXP share, some very detrimental tool cards. Heck, even the new Charm of Courage, getting rid of that is really, really powerful. 2 Escape Rope, because we do have 2 Evolved Pokemon, which do have 2 retreat cards. It's good to kind of get that easy sort of pivot out of it. The searching cards, we do play 2 Nest Balls and 3 Ultra Ball. I've really seen that this has kind of been my go-to when I go to gain searching Pokemon cards. Especially the reason why you have a high count of Ultra Ball, because these are ways to get the Magnezone V-Star, Regieleki VMAX, and Flapping. Having a high count to get into those tries to help with your consistency to draw into them as much as possible and hopefully get out of those sort of answers. Because you use Miraidon EX to get all your basics. Having 2 Nest Balls is kind of like extra sort of search out to try and get that turn 1 Miraidon EX, and that's always really good late game, or potentially if you've got your bench full, really good easy discard through Ultra Ball. And to round up, we do play 4 copies of Electric Generator. Very, very powerful by looking at the top 5 cards of your deck, and if there's 2 Lightning Energies in there, attach them to your bench Lightning Pokemon. Doesn't have to be evolved, doesn't have to be basic, really, really powerful, and hopefully we're playing 14 energies, so it's trying to get that consistently, trying to hit that every single turn. We also play, for our supporters, 1 copy of Avery. Avery is really good, especially in the likes of Guard of War and sometimes even Lost Box, but primarily you play it for Guard of War and Mew, forcing them to discard potentially 2 very important resources like their Curliers, like their Genesects is really, really impactful. Even though we do a Path to Peak in play, having that Avery can really slow down the opponent and try and keep up that pressure which this deck is constantly trying to build. 2 copies of Boss's Orders is really good to try and get that gusting sort of effect, potentially get that bench Pokemon, get that extra KO, something you chipped in earlier with Raikou, get that extra KO through that way. 2 copy of Arven, I really still like Arven and Miraidon. I think Arven is a really, really powerful option. Kind of getting that Electro Generation plus any of your tool cards impossible, even that Forest Steel Stone, which you can keep in hand or potentially attach, and hopefully you don't get got rid of due to Lost Vacuum, trying to have that guaranteed way to get that Boss's Orders for next turn, or that extra Electro Generator to try and get the support. But the reason why this deck is really powerful is to play 3 copies of Iona. Now, Iona is one of the best supporters we've seen in a very long time. Shuffle your hand and put it bottom of the deck and draw equal to amount of prize cards you have in play. Very much like N, which we've had before, all this sort of time. And it's really what has helped heal, and I think kind of brought this deck about. Yes, Judge can be very sort of impactful like a Judge Path deck, but Iona Path is even more detrimental, potentially getting your opponent down to 1, maybe even 2, maybe even 3 cards. If it's below the magic 4 number, it can be really struggle for them to potentially keep into the game. They could try and like claw back potentially a couple more wins. And to round up the supporters, we do play obviously 3 copies of Research. Now, as you can see here, we do play 2 Path to Peak and 2 Beach Core. Now, why don't we play a high count of it? Well, the reason why we don't play a huge count of Path to Peak and only a 2-2 split is pure on the basis that some decks aren't actually sort of playing a huge amount of Path to Peak themselves or counters to it. Gardevoir potentially may play guarantee maybe 2 Stadium, plus potentially a Worker and a Power Pad. That's 4 outs. But if you can try and get that like pressure in with the Iona Path lock, that can really slow them down. Even Path plus Magnezone to get a KO onto Curlers on the bench, really try and cheek out some of those wins is really, really important. And the reason we still have Beach Court in, because we want to pressure out it's Miraidon. We want to pressure out a turn 1 attack, and that's why we played a 1 copy of Beach Court. The other support tool cards we do play is a Choice Belt. Choice Belt is good because if we don't need it in play, Regieleki VMAX plus the Choice Belt equals 280 damage if your opponent has a full bench with Raikou or just on Miraidon. This is really, really powerful, getting that extra KO on the likes of Arceus and any of the big sort of V-stars out there like Giratina is really, really good. And with an extra Regieleki VMAX in play, that means a KO on Mew, or if 3 extra VMAX, that's your KO on Gardevoir, or even 3 of them plus Choice Belt equal KO on Duraludon. And 1 copy of EXP Share and 1 copy of Forest Steel Stone. EXP Share, even if we have Fluffing in there, is still really, really important. Trying to potentially guarantee those 2 NGs, which could come from Raikou staying the board, is really, really important. Miraidon really struggles if it can't constantly be ramping out these attacks constantly. If you have to potentially go past a turn, you can already fall behind and not guarantee any sort of advancement in the board state. That's why we're playing EXP Share and a Fluffy in this list to constantly streamline those attackers. And 14 energies here. From my testing, I did try with 13, but I think 14 is exactly what this deck needs because it constantly trying to go through your deck as possible, trying to be that disruptive. Potentially going to 13, you'll really sacrifice the consistency of the list. You want to have those higher count energies, so you're constantly getting those streamlined attackers. If you miss a turn 1 attack or potentially the turn 1 path, this deck is pretty much over, and that's why I still think Miraidon is still something to be talked about because it can still add that huge pressure being turn 1, big one-hit KOs and path, just like what Mew has been. So its matchups overall is kind of pretty positive. I would say it has a pretty positive Gardevoir EX matchup, purely on the testing that I've done myself in sort of understanding how the lists work. Lost Bucks and Lost Tina, I would say, is also a little bit more positive. It can obviously still struggle with that sort of list, but the pressure of constantly trying to get out KO the Manaphy plus the 2 prizes on the bench or 2 single prizes Pokemon are really, really powerful. And you do have a high number of HP in there, which can really struggle sometimes with a Lost Box of matchup. Lost and Giratina, you can get the 1-hit KO as long as you try and pressure and try and get the 1-hit KO first. You're in that good sort of situation. And Lugia, I would say, Miraidon still is a very powerful sort of archetype where if you can potentially Ion them, path them, and not guarantee they can get out their Archeops in play, you're in a really good sort of spot. And some of your negative ones, I would say Shein Power is definitely a 50-50. From my testing through that, Shein Power can still really do well underneath the path lock because they're normally playing about 2 to 4 outs to guarantee get out of path. Mew and Arctina is definitely quite a bit of a struggle because Mew has potentially going to fusion build one. They can get the 1-hit KOs very, very easily and use single prizes to get the 1-hit KOs, which sometimes Miraidon can really, really struggle with. Getting that extra sort of being them a path deck in play, and they have loads more outs to go around it, it doesn't really stick with it. In our case, Giratina, I always find is a lot more or less favorable because they can have multiple cards away to get out of the path lock as they are additionally a path deck. Miraidon EX is definitely the weakest of the path deck, But it's a really fun one to try out. Definitely if you've got a few cups you want to go to, or potentially have a surprise NAIC sort of list. I think Miraidon is in a really, really good spot right now in the new format, just with having Paths to Peak out there, kind of being its main sort of point in there. Now, you might notice there's no Charm of Courage. I've been testing that, and really, you don't really need that because it's already getting KO'd pretty much from every single thing. It could potentially help in those single prize Pokemon, but realistically, you're always going to get the Lugia's going to get the KOs on you quite easily. Miraidon's going to get the KO quite easily. And Giratina doesn't stop you against that. Xianpao doesn't really stop you with that. So quite a lot of these decks, which it might need just one extra energy, is not actually that difficult for them to get the big one-hit KO on it. So that's why I haven't gone the Charm of Courage. Because I found from testing, the likes of... why am I blanking on it? The likes of Gardevoir can really easily get that big one-hit KO damage on that. So that's why I don't play that. You could potentially go to higher counts of Paths to Peak, maybe go to a 3-1 split of Stadiums, but you want to still have that switching out because you want to try and guarantee that big one-hit KO potentially on the first turn. Anyway, this is my Miraidon EX, like Path sort of deck here. Is this the new way to play Miraidon? Is Path exactly the right partner to go with Miraidon after it's had that big setup? If you agree, please leave a like down below and obviously comment sort of your thoughts and feelings of this deck. Is this one you want to try testing out for NAIC, or is this like a hot garbage list which you'll just go say, nah, it's an easy one to kind of win against it? I think it's a really strong sort of option, but obviously there's a lot more counters out there as we've kind of seen in the past. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in a few days. Bye for now.